the Google Doc is in the chat, and for those watching the recording, I will have it in our LinkedIn group. So you will be able to click on the document there if you want to go through the exercises we're going to do. And this is supposed to be for beginners in reports and dashboards. So if it's old hat to you, then it seems too basic. Please just chime in with questions or suggestions, or point out things that beginners would need to know. That would be great. And so that's where we're gonna start today. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Does it say reports and dashboards? All right.
Yes.
Excellent. So today we'll be talking about why we use reports, different report attributes that you should ask your users about. So basically, what should you prompt them with? Because every time someone says, oh, I want a report, and you say, well, what do you want to see? They're going to say everything, and they really don't want to see everything. So I have some questions to kind of think through that you can talk to or speak to when somebody's asking you for a report. Standard and custom report types, the filter features, different report formats, the limitations that reports have, and then report formulas versus object formulas. And we're going to be building a couple of those in the exercise. So your Salesforce database is populated with some great information about your donors, volunteers, and clients. So reports and dashboards help organize this to make decisions, to draw organizations to make decisions to drive their mission forward. So a great example of an informative nonprofit report that can help inform those decisions would be a report that shows which donors were retained between 2 years ago and last year, and it can give fundraisers a list of low-hanging fruit to approach to meet revenue targets for this year. So if they gave 2 years ago and last year, then you can segment your report, and then you can know, oh, okay, these people are going to probably be more likely to give this year, so I'm going to approach them first. And that's the report we're going to build. So those attributes that I talked about, oops, is this bar showing on the screen? This stop sharing, new share? Okay, good. It just kind of blocking my view. So attributes in a report request from a user. So you need to know the objects or the type of records needed. So you might not want to use the word object when you're talking to someone, or if you create a form or a case form, sometimes people do for report requests, you're going to want to say, what records do you want to see? So I want to see all gifts that have a close date of last year. So that's my time frame, and that's really important. And that's often one that's left out when somebody requests a report. And what's the criteria? Like, what does that record look like? And that's going to be your filters. And then how do you want those to be grouped? And we'll be grouping some columns today. And then the fields to include in the report, which they might not list out all the fields. That might be a little bit of a back and forth, but these are good, like, basic things to, if you're doing user training, to tell them, this is the information I need, and this is why I need it, so that I can build this report. So if you do a training similar to what I'm doing right now, so that users understand how reports are set up, then I think it'll be easier for them to give you that criteria. So here's an example with those categories. So all unrestricted operating gifts. So the gifts is the object because that's going to be opportunities. Unrestricted operating is a filter. Over $1,000. Last fiscal year, so that's the time frame. Grouped by close month, and primary contacts, address, email, and phone need to be included. So report types is that first category. So what objects do I want to include? So there's custom report types and standard report types, and we're going to build a custom report type in the exercise. So an example of a standard report type out of the box is accounts with opportunities. And custom report types give you the option of adding in various factors, like I want accounts with or without opportunities. And what that will do is pull in the opportunity fields as available fields you can put into your report without having to exclude any accounts. Another example would be if you wanted to, and this is what we're going to do. So from an opportunity, if you wanted to get some primary campaign source details, if you just did an opportunity report, that's the standard opportunity report that Salesforce gives you, you couldn't drill down into any of the fields that exist in the primary campaign source that lives on that opportunity. But if you had a custom report type, you can drill down so that you could get the budgeted cost of the campaign and the actual cost of the campaign and the expected revenue of the campaign and all those fields from that campaign. Then you can pull them into your opportunity report and really see how well the campaign is doing and where things are in the pipeline to see if you're going to hit that revenue target as part of that campaign. So that's the one we're going to build too. So some cool things about, or some good things about standard report types is it will include some standard fields from related objects. So that opportunity report type will include some fields from the account and from the primary contact. And it will automatically add new custom fields. So if I create a custom field on an object and I had previously created that custom report type I just talked about where I had pulled in fields from the primary campaign, right now, and I've read things that Salesforce is going to release some changes to this, but right now that field that I create doesn't automatically pull into my custom report type. So I have to go back and edit it every time I create a field. Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be every time I create a field, but if I'm using the custom report type and notice the field isn't there, that's the first thing I check. And then I check the field level security. So that is the other thing with, there are some security parameters around reports. So if someone doesn't have access to a field, then they will not have access to that field on the report.
Can I share an update on that?
Yes, please.
Available now in our orgs as of, I think, winter 21. If you go to report and dashboard settings and setup, there's an option to automatically add new custom fields to custom report types. And it's even better than I expected because I believe when you add a new custom field, it prompts you for which custom report types you want to add it to. And I believe it's in beta. So I guess that means it might not work perfectly, but it seems to be working.
That's awesome. Okay, because that's my least favorite thing about custom report types. So,
Yes.
which I'm sure is a lot of people. So another thing that's really cool about custom report types, like I said, you can include custom fields via lookup from parent objects. So you'll see what I mean when we go through the exercise where we create the custom report type and pull in those fields. All right, so report filters. We have various types of filters. We have field filters, so that's the ones that I wanted here. So I want to know what filters we have. So I can filter on a field of the amount field on an opportunity if it's over $1,000, and I can filter on the type of gift it is, so if it's restricted or unrestricted. So those are field filters because I have a type field on my opportunity and I have an amount field on my opportunity. And then a cross filter would be if I wanted to only see certain opportunity or certain objects. So let's just say opportunities. So if I only wanted to see opportunities that didn't have, I could put without account soft credits or without partial soft credits or without some related object to my primary object. And then filter logic, obviously, we could say, I want records that look like this or like this. And that's really good when you have some complex requirements, or, you know, there's two slices of records that a user is requesting from you. All right, so if you open up your sheet, your Google sheet right here. I'm going to log in to our demo org. And if you have yours, for those who are here for the first time, welcome. Previously, we have done some exercises where people were able to get either open a trial of the Nonprofit Success Pack or download the Nonprofit Success Pack onto a developer edition. So if you don't have one to play around with, please just watch the recording and do the exercises later. But if you do have your demo org that you've been using, feel free to open it right now. And we will get to formula field. So if I go into my reports, which I'm going to click on the report tab and click on a new report. If I do an opportunities or an account with, okay, let's do contacts and accounts. So if I do a contacts and accounts report, this is what the Lightning report builder looks like. I'm going to click on the filter item. The first filter, I want to say, okay, which accounts do I want? I want all accounts. And then this is the time frame that I talked about. So let's just do all accounts, all time, because this doesn't have a big data set. If you want to see it as it's running, you can click on update preview automatically. If you have a lot of fields or your computer's running slow, you can uncheck that because the Lightning report builder tends to be a little bit slower, or it can be. And if I want, I can run this report. And if I'm trying to see the number of accounts in my system, it's not 113. This is the number of contact records pulling, because I'm pulling both contacts and accounts, because you can see there's 2 contacts at United Oil and Gas Singapore. So one thing that's really great to do with this, or that you can do, is to create something that they call the power of one formula. So I want to be able to just say, okay, what are the total number of accounts in this report? So if I go to setup, this is the first exercise in the worksheet I have in the Google Doc. And I click on Object Manager and Account, Fields and Relationships, and I click on New, and we create a formula. And don't be intimidated, because it's going to be the easiest formula you've ever built. And we're going to call this total number of accounts. And we'll make it a number field, and we'll make it 0 decimal places. And all we have to do is put a number 1 in here. And what this is doing is mimicking, if you're familiar with Excel's count function, that mimics the count function. And we'll make it visible to everybody. Again, if a user logged in and this field wasn't visible to them, then they could not access it if they had rights to build reports. So they could not pull it into the report. And there's no need to put it on the account layout, because this is just for reports. So I'm going to press save, and that field should now be in this standard report type. I'll click edit. And if I do total, well,
I think for it to automatically add, you have to go into the setup settings and you have to turn it on.
Right, but it does automatically add for standard.
Oh, that's a standard. Oh yeah, duh. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thanks, Caitlin.
Okay.
I'm gonna do a shift refresh. Oh, and maybe it was because I hadn't saved that report. We'll do it again real fast. There it is, total number of accounts. And again, I'm going to go to filters, all accounts, all time. And then I have to go over to this total number of accounts, and I can press summarize and sum this field. And when I run this now, it should give me the row count, which is 113. So that's the number of contacts in the report. And then the total number of accounts is 106. And so I like to use this power of one formula on pretty much every object. So any object that I'm pulling a report from, if I need to know the total number of the parent, so if I pulled a accounts with custom object record, right? And so I have this custom object that has multiple records on each account. I want to still be able to tell the total number of accounts, or I want to be able, if it goes down a level, I want to be able to say the total number of custom objects. So were some people able to build that report field, or sorry, that power formula field, or do you want a minute to do that? I'm going to give everybody 1 or 2 minutes to try that. So try to build that formula field, and I'll check out the chat. So Dodie, you think there's something that's been added to replace Power of One?
I did hear something about that. I think Steve Mo commented on it, that it is useful for a lot of things, but it still won't do everything. So we'll still get to enjoy teaching about Power of One.
No, I mean, it's good to know. Well, especially because anything that's been there are new things coming out every year, but if you're new to Salesforce and it's your first Salesforce job and you see these fields, then you'll want to know what they are. Like, yes. Why is this formula field just a 1? What does that mean?
I also wanted to ask you, I get a little confused about why the standard report is contacts and accounts. I think in a sales environment, maybe that makes more sense than it does in a nonprofit setting. And I typically create a contacts only report type. And while I'm mentioning that, I'll put a plug in for Evan Ponter's Report Force blog and his recommendations around single object reports with lookup, I don't know if you're going to cover that little link where you get to pull in fields from other objects.
Oh, yes. We're going to do that.
Yeah. But it surprises me that there isn't a standard report type just for contacts. And I always create one, but I wondered what other people's practices are.
What is the problem with the contacts and accounts?
Well, I guess because of, I guess there isn't a problem. I just, because I'm sort of a fan of that whole approach of single object report types and the fact that we can't customize standard report types. So if I was going to create something I could modify, should I create a contacts and accounts one, or should I just create a contacts one? That's what I'm sort of debating.
Okay. Well, let's get into the custom report types in a minute. That's the last exercise I have, but basically the beauty of being able to pull in the objects and the fields that you want from the related objects from the custom report. So I couldn't imagine personally in my use cases where I wouldn't want a certain account detail, but you can do that, like you said, via lookup, and program it yourself. Which fields from the account do you want to pull into your report type? I think that if you do contacts with accounts as your custom report type, then you don't have to pick and choose the fields. You can just be like, I want all the account fields that are available.
Right.
I think that's the reason.
But then we could also remove any that we don't want to make it clean for the users.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience so far, no one has really tailored the report types or the reports. So when users go to try to make their own reports, and I think in nonprofits, that's a lot more common than in sales settings, because people have ad hoc things they want to ask their data all the time. And I want to empower them to create reports, but they go in there and there's usually just a sea of options. And so I'm hoping when I set people up for the first time on Salesforce or get to modify their org, to really pare that down to just like the basics of what they need.
Right. And if they don't have access to the fields, that's the other thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because then it looks cleaner to them, because then it's only the fields that they normally see.
True.
So this next exercise to create a donor retention report. So here's our requirement. The major gifts officer wants to know how many households gave $1,000 2 years ago, but didn't give last year. So what's the percentage of donors that gave $1,000 2 years ago, but didn't give last year? And so that is similar to this report that I've built for the CDC Foundation. So this is just a simple accounts report. We're going to do a contacts and accounts report so we can use that power of one formula that we just built. So if I go to, I'm going to do this one instead. Here. Okay. So this, you can see what the report type is at the top. So if you're looking at reports and you want to figure out what objects are available, the report type, contacts and accounts, sits up here. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to create a bucket column. So I'm going to try to do all of this in Lightning. I prefer the classic editor, but I'm trying to shift because I'm sure they'll take it away from me eventually. So if I click on edit and I want to create a bucket field, I would go over here to add bucket column. And so what a bucket field enables you to do is take a number field, like if you wanted to do a gift range, for instance. So I could take the amount of the gift and then I could say, okay, well, if it's greater than or equal to one number, then I'm gonna, or 50, then I'm gonna put it to 0 to 50, or less than or equal to 50, then it's 0 to 50, and I can do different ranges. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna find the total gifts last year. I skipped one step. We'll make the bucket field first, and then I'll do the first step that makes this bucket field accurate. So we're going to call this donor retention, or donor retained, question mark. So if it's less than or equal to 0, then I'm going to say the donor was not retained. And if it's greater than or equal to 0, I'm going to say the donor was retained. And what makes this work, as I skip to the first step, is the filter has to be total gifts 2 years ago. So on this report, I have a custom field that I'm using. But if I do total gifts 2 years ago is greater than 0. So now I'm getting, because my requirement was to get everybody who gave 2 years ago, that's what they have in common. Some of them gave last year and some of them didn't, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So that's what you'll put in your org when you're doing it. I'm deleting that out because I'm doing it on a custom field in this example that I already built. And then, so now that donors retained this year and last year, I'm actually going to group the rows by that bucket field that I just created. So it's not going to come up for me because I already have it grouped. But if I exit out this. So then you're going to group your rows by the bucket field that you just created. And there we go. Donor. Retained last year. That's what I called the field originally. And you can update the preview automatically or not. If I don't show the details, then when I run it, oh, now my computer's going to freeze because I've clicked too many places. Well, I'm just going to refresh since it didn't want to work. And I'll give everybody a chance, a second to do those steps. The other filter in our requirement is that they gave a total of $1,000 2 years ago. So really, instead of 0, this needs to be greater or equal to 1,000. And I don't have it previewing automatically, so I can press run here. And if you don't have data in your org, then you might not be getting any results. But what this is showing, if I turn off the details, is that a total of $250,000 was not retained from 28 accounts. That was the total number of accounts field that we pulled into our report previously. So if you created the contacts and accounts report, then pulled that new field in, then summarized it, that's what this should start to look like. These are fields that I summarized, the sum of amount of gifts 2 fiscal years ago, including soft, and sum of amount last fiscal year, including soft. The standard NPSP fields will be called total gifts 2 years ago and total gifts last year. This is a custom field roll up that we've been over on other Saturdays. Okay, so I'm going to assume that everybody's done unless they say something else to the contrary. So now I want to actually get the donor retention churn rate in a formula. So I'm going to do it from this one. The reason we chose contacts and accounts as, and you could have chosen accounts, but the reason is that the requirement was for them to have email and phone number as well. So they want to be able to contact these donors that they didn't retain. But we do need to use that total number of accounts in our donor retention formula. So now that I have things grouped, I can add a formula. So you can only add formulas to reports when reports are grouped by something, summary format. And I apologize, I accidentally opened this up for editing in Classic, which I said I was not going to do. So let me try again. That's just habit.
It's okay, Sarah. We still love you.
I love you too. Okay, so like I said, it has, in order to add a formula field, it has to be grouped. So then I can click on this Create Formula button, and it's going to open up a screen. It might take a second. Okay. So then I want to name it donor retention rate. And you could call it donor churn / retention rate. That's because one column or one row is going to be the retained donors and one will be the ones not retained. Now, technically, you don't have to do this. This is just an example, but because we grouped it, you could do a pie chart. So that percentage would automatically be there when you have a pie chart because of the way we grouped it, donors and donors not retained. This is just for example purposes of how you would do a percentage formula based on certain groupings that you create in your report. So if I go to display, that's the first thing I want to do is I only want to do my formula. I want to do it as a percentage, and I only want to do it at the specific grouping level of donors retained this year. So the actual formula, if you look over here, it's going to be the sum of the total number of accounts in the report over the what they call parent group val, so over the sum of the accounts at the grand summary level. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in there. Actually, I'll show you how to build it. So I'm going to go to total. I'm going to search for total number of accounts and click on, you see how it says sum right there? So I want the sum of the total number of accounts, and then I want to divide it. So I can just press this divide button. And then I want a function, and my function is going to be parent group val. So what that does is it calculates the value of a summary field for a specified grouping level higher than the formula display level. So it's only the summary field is going to be, again, that total number of accounts sum. And then at the grouping level, that's called grand summary. And I know how to do the groupings in Classic. I don't know if they have something that's just WYSIWYG. Does anybody know in Lightning? Or you just have to know it's grand summary. Let's see. Grouping fields. Nope. Oh, but that's kind of cool. You can insert the bucket field. But we're going to do, and that might work. But I'm going to do it the way I know how. And you can find this kind of formula on Google. So if you're trying to figure out a donor retention rate, or you just want to know how to group how to do a percentage based on two groupings and compare like a lead conversion rate or something like that, just Google it and you can copy and paste the formula. And then as you go, learn what they mean and learn how to read them. But if you need to magically do it, now see, I created two because I was doing one as an example. But now you can see, if I didn't have this chart on here, I could see still what the retention or churn rate was. And then I could put this on a dashboard. And so that's the next thing I'd like you to do. So if you click on the pie chart or the little toggle chart and you click on the settings gear icon, you can click on donut, and then the value would be the sum of the total number of counts, and it'll be sliced by the donors retained this year, and you can show the percentages and combine things. We don't need to do that because we don't have a little set slice, but that means that if there were a whole bunch of different slices, so if you had this summarized and there were like 100 things and there were only 4 big categories, the 4 big categories would have slices that you could see here. And then there would be another one that would be other. So that is step 4 in our creating our donor retention report. I'm just going to give everybody one more minute to do that, to make sure that you've got it done. Because I think these hands-on things, it's easier. And I know that it's kind of like Trailhead, you know, they give you the instructions to do it, and then it takes you a minute to figure out what you just did. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in at any time. Okay. So now, creating the custom report type that we just talked about. So if I go to setup, and I'm actually going to do that from my dev org, and I type in report types, and continue. And I am going to create a new one. Or you can create a new one. I already created this with this, so I could do the screenshots in the document. But opportunities with primary campaign source. So when I start out making it, it's going to look sort of like this. I pick my primary object as opportunities. It'll be a pick list there. And then I make a report label, opportunities with primary campaign source. I have to have a description of it. And if you don't want it to show to users and you're still trying to develop it, you can keep it as in development, but it won't appear and be available unless you press deployed. So then if I click on, when I save it and I click on next, if you follow the slide, you can, this is what it should be looking like for you. So you'll first be building this piece and set it in the opportunities category. And then you click this and then you click save, you click next and then save. And then we're going to click on this edit layout button. So this is where custom reports I found are the most helpful, because a lot of times, for example, with the CDC Foundation, they use the general accounting units, and the general accounting units are tied to specific programs that they run. So if they want the name or a field to be, they want a field to be filtered by a certain type of fund program. So if I only wanted emergency response funds, then I would need to go add fields related via lookup. So it would be this, and then the primary general accounting unit, then the primary fund program, and then be able to check off the box I wanted. In this case, we want to click on primary campaign source. So I clicked on add fields via lookup. Then I click on primary campaign source. And then I'm able to select expected revenue in the campaign, that actual cost of the campaign, the budgeted cost of the campaign, and other, let's see, I want the value of the won opportunities in the campaign. I want the value of the opportunities in the campaign. I want the number of opportunities. So that's just opportunities in campaign. And then won opportunities in campaign. That's also a number field. It's not, that's the standard label on the field. It's not necessarily intuitive. So what I can do with this now is, if I had a direct mailing campaign, say, I would be able to have the analysis be based on the goals and targets. So I have a budgeted amount in the campaign and I have the target. So I will go ahead and click on, I will show you an example of what this would look like at the end. So this is an example of what you're able to do when you can do that kind of thing. So this is actually campaigns with campaign members report. But I also have, I'm going to try to find it. Direct mail analysis. I'm able to see the direct mail targeted donors that responded, how much they responded by. I can look at the amount directly attributed to the campaign. I can look at the net revenue. So these are the donations received. This is how much we spent on the mailing. So we still have to get some more in that mailing. However, campaign influence, which I'm not going to go over right now because we're focusing on reports, but you can see that the number of because of the number of touches that the people have had, including direct mail, they've surpassed what they actually spent on the direct mailing. And I know that's a lot of info, but does anybody have any questions? Okay, somebody said, how can we make a progress report about how much an org donated over the years? That's a great question. So what that would look like, if I went into a report and I would create a new report, and I would make it an opportunities report. And then I could group it by all opportunities, all time. But let's say I just wanted a specific donor, so a specific organization. You don't have to do it by a specific organization. I'm only going to do that because I'm in an org with lots of data. So you could either group it by the account name, or I'm going to say the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So if I go to my outline here, I'm going to group by close date. And then if I want to get it year over year, I'm going to go over to my, let me see if I have closed. I'm going to click on update preview automatically so that I can see it. Okay, I must have misspelled it. I'll just do contain Scapes Foundation. So you can see here, I said I was going to group it by close date, but this is just doing one date. But if you wanted it year over year, you click on group dates by calendar year, or in this case, we're going to do fiscal year because their fiscal year is different from their calendar year. And if I just wanted to see amount, I could sum the amount here, summarize amount. And then I could hide the details of the report because all I want to see is the amount year over year that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has given. And they're a huge public health supporter, so they've given a lot over the years to the CDC Foundation. So that's how you do it. You group it by the close date. You summarize any of the information. So if you wanted total number of accounts, like the Power of One field we created, you could do that here. You would, if you wanted it per account, so each year per account, you could group it by the account as well. So if you wanted to view it over, you would want it to be at the top if you wanted the account and then all the years they gave, and then the next account and all the years they gave, or you'd want it on the right-hand side of this, so that, or it would be the second grouping. So if I was going to put another grouping, it would look like this. So you see how it repeats itself? So instead of it repeating itself, if you didn't have a filter that was specific to an account and you just did it by, say, household record type or something like that, you would see multiple accounts and each one of them with the close dates and how much they gave each year. Does that answer your question, Harpreet? Yes. Okay, great.
What if you wanted to be able to type in a name of a foundation so you could run that for anything?
You mean, so then you could go down here.
But without editing the report?
No, you can't do it without editing the report.
Right.
But you could save this report and then train your users, hey, if you want to see it for a specific foundation, just type it in here. So if I say the account name contains CDC, then there's a lot of account names with CDC, but this is what it would look like. But if you had the specific name of the foundation or person, you could do it here. Other questions? Stumped the Sarah. Could a flow do that for users? Like a flow to see which foundations gave what amount? I feel like that's over engineering. Yeah, I mean, a flow you could ask what account through a record choice set. So it could almost be like it would be like a pick list. And then I guess you could have it create a report. I don't know. But like I said, I think that's over engineering the solution, because it'd be much easier to just train them to do this and not take all that time to build a complex flow unless it's something that has a use case of multiple times a day. But yeah, flows are fun. I have the same kind of thing, Pamela. Like and I'm reading the chat for everybody. I'm not just having a conversation with myself. I often try to figure out a way to do screen flows for requests, and sometimes they can be pretty helpful. So for the CDC Foundation, for instance, they tag all their fund programs. So all the programs that they have, they tag them with geography and initiatives and different tag types. But the tag is actually an object that is only one tag. So if I go to, say, geography, this is a screen flow that I created. And then United States of America, then it's going to add the United States of America tag to the fund program without them having to look up, because what they were doing was looking on a spreadsheet, which no good, right? So they were looking on a spreadsheet to see which tag would go into this junction object. So if I clicked on new, this is a junction object fund program tag, and then I have a United States of America tag, but I would have to know what it's called. So this way, and they're required to put a geography tag, a initiative tag, and a design tag on all the fund programs. So this way it made it a whole lot easier. So I think that's a better example of when you'd use screen flow. I don't see a use case for when you do it for a report. Okay, now I didn't take the time to write out in the Google Doc how to do a dashboard element, but I'm going to show you what I did with that report that we just built. So the donor retention report. So if I click on overall donor analysis, I'm going to refresh my report. If your numbers look wrong or you see this caution sign, go ahead and click on the refresh button. And each report has, or each dashboard has several different types of charts you can put on each dashboard. Now this is taking too long to refresh. Okay. We'll try one more time. All right, I'll do it fresh. We'll start from scratch. So if I click on dashboards and I click on new dashboard, you'll have to name your dashboard. So you could name it donor retention analysis. And then this is what it looks like. So you'll want to add a component and you'll want to select the report that you just saved. So we have bar charts. So different types of bar charts that you can choose from. A line chart that obviously is a line. The donut chart, which is what we use to compare the donor retention rate. A metric chart where you can pick one specific number. So the sum of the amount of the gifts last fiscal year. This gauge chart, this is good for setting dashboard elements based on opportunity goals, so revenue goals that a organization might have. So if you had, let's just say we had 500 million as the goal, and then we set breakpoints for when it's in the red and when it's in the yellow and when it's in the blue, green. And I usually just try to divide this by 3. Divided by 3. Okay, so 166,666. And then somewhere in the middle of that, invalid range. Oh, I did it in the wrong spot. I'm just going to cancel out of that. Then your pipeline report or your funnel report will do things into segments as they move down. So a lot of the times that might be for a pipeline where you have things at different stages. The funnel report at the top will show you the one at the biggest stage, and then at the bottom it'll start sifting down. So if you have more opportunities at closed one, it'll be at the bigger piece of the pie, and then it'll move down from there. So sales reps like to see their funnel, like where are most of my opportunities sitting, and you can really see it graphically and visually like that. And then some users really like to be able to see a table on their dashboard in addition to the graphical elements. The other thing is, if you have a chart on your object, you can click on use chart from settings from the report, and then it knows to pull in that chart that I already built on the report. So I think playing around with percentages and summaries and bucket fields in terms of donor analysis is really great. So combining that with some of the other things we've covered, like customizable roll-ups and that sort of thing, can start to really get a good picture of what your donors look like. I was going to try to touch on a little Einstein prediction model, and I will see if it ran what I tried to do this morning. I haven't done it that much, but you do get one free Einstein enabled thing, and the logic I put behind mine really can be analyzed in a report, but I just wanted to make it super simple. So I went to Einstein Prediction Builder. Oh, it's ready for review. So I think I probably put too many fields on it. So basically, CDC Foundation had a third party come in and help them with scoring their donors based on a major gift score and a loyalty score. So I was going to try to put in an Einstein prediction of based on their loyalty score. So let's just name this major donor probability 2. So I'm going to define the segment. So I'm going to do this on the account level. That's where the donor score is. And then I'm going to only focus on ones that have a major donor score greater than a number, 0. and a loyalty score greater than a number 0. So I can definitely, sorry, excuse me. I could definitely do this in a report. Like I could just put those criteria in a filter in a report, but I just thought I'd play with this. So I'm gonna do it with a yes, no. Okay, is this person worth approaching or not? The number criteria sounds like it would be more complicated to program. And then I'm not going to base it on a field. I think that's how I did it. Because I'm going to use filters to set up the prediction. So you can select a field and tell which records to use as an example of a field that causes a prediction. So I don't know, I can't think of one right now. But then I just did yes examples and no examples. So I did if the major donor score was above 50 and then the loyalty score was above 75, then yes, they're on the high priority to contact first, and no, then they weren't. So so if it's you want it greater than or equal to a number 50. And you can see it tells you, like every time you have to make a choice here, there's examples and you can read about what's actually going on. And then I'm going to add the no examples to be opposite of that. So you can see this is really kind of a simple logic that I could do in a report. But I've just started play with this morning, so. Oh wait, this needs to be less than a number 50. And the loyalty score needs to be less than a number 75. And this time I'm only going to pick the 2 fields. So this last time I picked all the fields. So I was like, oh, let me just select all of them. And I think that probably caused it to take a long time to run, and it probably gave it it gave it those errors that I got. And you have to create a field to store your prediction in. So I'm just going to call it donor probability yes, no. And then I'm going to say show the top predictors on records. I don't know I can read this. Predictors which represent fields display in this component regardless of field level security. Okay. So that's the difference. So if you're not supposed to know those donor scores, then you wouldn't want to do that. And then I'm going to click on build prediction. And then it takes a while to run, up to 24 hours. I was hoping to be able to see what the one I built that was ready for review was like, but I don't think I can. So does anybody else have any questions about reports or anything like this? Analytics? Things you've been stumped on? Okay, well, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. And I hope that you got something out of it. And please, my name's Sarah Epting. I don't know if I introduced myself at the beginning. So many people have been coming week after week, but I have my own consulting company, Technopath, and I just started it in March, but I am working specifically with nonprofits to help them implement Salesforce. I also have an apprenticeship program. If you are looking for experience, I'm currently taking applications. If you have your certification and you need more project experience, or if you want to volunteer on a project and you're an expert Salesforce person, please just LinkedIn message me. And if you haven't joined our LinkedIn group, please search for it on LinkedIn, Salesforce for Nonprofits, Salesforce Saturday for Nonprofits, and we'll add you to the group. And you can get all the information there. You can see the recordings there of the previous session. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Oh, and I will say, sorry, if you want to speak, or you know somebody who wants to speak at Salesforce Saturday, let me know. We have a special speaker lined up for February 13th who's going to talk about unauthenticated communities.
Sarah, I have something real quick that's sort of on the topic of reports. I'm working on a little chart to share with my clients about when to use a list view versus when to use a report.
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody has something like that already. If they have ideas they would like to contribute, if they would like to look at what I'm making and give me input or use it when it's done. So I'm just inviting collaboration around that question.
Okay, yes. I mean, I totally believe that a lot of times all that users need is a list view, and it's surprising to me how many times I've gone into an org with lots of users that don't know how to create their own list views.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. What are the things, I have the ones on top of my mind. What have you already identified as the categories?
Well, I've mostly had it in my head, but I just started putting it down as at the beginning of this. I mean, the big ones in my mind, the two things a list view can do that a report can't do is send list emails and inline editing. But I believe inline editing in reports is coming in a future release. And the thing you can do in reports that you can't do in a list view is export to Excel. And obviously, you know, then there's a whole series of things that I can say about customizing a report that you can't do in a list view, like accessing other objects and grouping and doing math and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that's what I would say is the exactly what you said, not the inline editing, sending list emails, that makes sense. And then the downside would be that you can't, when you're creating your filters, they can only be on the source object of the list view versus being able to say, I want contacts whose accounts are household accounts, or that's a bad example, but I want contacts that this applies on their account. You can't do that. You can't nest it. That would be great in future releases too.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that.
Yeah, but using list views does allow you to keep from having to do the housekeeping. I'm at an org where we're up to 25,000 reports because they gave the ability to create reports to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's never been any governance of any sort or housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
I did post the link to the app. It was called Field Pro. So if you inherit an org that's been a little too overeagerly massaged, shall we say, and they went happy with the Apex, and there are all sorts, and there are tons of fields, and it's driving away users. Field Pro will help because it'll look at something, it'll look and see if a field has been used in the past year, and if you happen to have users who, or stakeholders who think they're really great at Salesforce, so they absolutely want you to add this field, and they keep coming up to you with fields, that'll help you clean that out. But one of the things you can also do is ask them, okay, what help text do you want us to put in there? Because the help text is that little, either the little icon that's next to the field name, and it tells the end user what they're supposed to be putting in the field. And it also would force the stakeholders to think, okay, what do I really want them to put in there? And maybe it could be put in, maybe it's already answered. Because one of the things we also did in my org is we had different variants of email, like 6 different variants of an email field, 6 different variants of a phone number. Like, for example, assistant. Very few people have assistants nowadays. It just because of finances and cost cutting, those went away. So that field is just basically, it's just taking up space.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but yeah,
definitely true.
Yeah, and it's an older org, and unfortunately there wasn't a lot of cleaning. But it's always good to do some cleaning up, like once a year, run Field Pro and go, aha, what hasn't been used in the past year, and maybe we can move it off. And then after a while, if nobody misses it, nobody goes, oh, I was using that field, or they insist they were using that field even though you have the data to prove it wasn't. Then you can remove it and archive it and basically not have people looking at it. But if you do that on a regular basis, you're not having to do all of it at once and going, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself because all this housekeeping you wind up doing that never was done. So good habits to get into.
Definitely. That's a lot of reports.
It is, because
although I feel like I create 25,000 reports. I might be the worst.
Yeah, I mean, you can do them and you can kind of sit there and sort through them and figure out when they were last used. But like I said, it apparently they didn't think about it and they gave all these permissions to everybody. And that seemed to be their way of solving problems. Was, oh, let's give somebody more permissions. Let's give them this.
That's the fastest way to solve it.
It is, but
it happens a lot. That's why. It's just people don't think about the consequences down the line. Just go ahead and make that person a system admin because they need to do their job, and we can't figure out why they're getting that error.
No. Yeah, we had about 70 admins, and that was way too many.
I think this is a really important question. I mean, even if they're not an admin, especially in a small nonprofit, we do want our users to be empowered to ask the data whatever questions they need to ask. I don't think we want them coming to us for every report request. So creating that governance that Mary mentioned earlier is really important, like naming conventions and, teaching people to use the filter instead of creating a new version of the report for every month or every year or every day or every minor change. But I don't know if anybody's aware of any guidance around this, as a new organization gets started, and I warn them that this can happen very quickly. What are some good governance things to put in place? And my second follow-up question is, I am not really using Workbench or any tools to query the data other than reports and list views, which I think I need to get on that, because I also just create a report when I need to look, see the data. And then it's that question, well, do I save this or do I not save this? I'm going to need it again. I'll save it. What's that?
They make you save it now. They didn't used to. That's why mine gets so junked up, is they make you save it and then you'd have to delete it out. Before I run it, it makes me save and run it.
No, you can run it. There's a run button.
Yes, I know, but sometimes it will, and maybe it's because I tend to go in the classic version, but sometimes the run button is grayed out and I have to click save and run. It won't let me run it. I don't know why. It didn't used to be that way.
Yeah, I think in classic they're starting to do less things in classic. In classic, you do have to save it. But in Lightning, you can just kind of sit there and play around and go, what am I looking for? And let's see what happens if I do this and this. And you can sit there and run the report, because I've gone in and edited reports and just run them and then closed out. And the report is the same.
Yes, when you edit one that's already saved. I'm talking about creating a new one And that's where the governance and policies comes in, Mary, and say, hey, don't do that. Don't try to create a new report. Find the one that has the report type you're looking for, edit it, don't save it, and run it, so that you don't have all these reports junking up. Even if it's just in your private report folder, it's taking up data, which is taking up space. It's going into our limits.
Right. It
So
doesn't.
that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Well, it also it starts hitting your data. So, you know, and after a while that starts costing you money.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It starts reaching your data limits.
Yeah. One of the things you might want to do is when you're looking at all those, is have a long talk with whoever's the head of the org or whoever the main stakeholder is, if it's an implementation, and say, do you really, I mean, can you do this report as run as view as running user, and maybe that way you don't have to have a report for everybody on the team. So instead of 15 separate reports, you've got one, and it's set to that way, and you save yourself some real estate that way. But you also, if you don't have that, if you don't give people the ability to create reports, the most junior users, the ones who are brand new, and then maybe only give the manager that ability. And that idea came to me from David Carnes, and you might want to have him talk, because he also does a lot of stuff in reports. That's one of his big focuses. He's the one who pointed out that it was a Salesforce thing that allowed people to export reports. And in the corporate world, at least, or actually and nonprofits, because I was at a nonprofit where that happens, the founder exported all of the company's would-be donors and current donors and used that to seed fund his new nonprofit. So, because they hadn't disabled his account yet.
Yeah, no. I mean, and he was a director anyway.
Right, but shame on him for doing that, but also shame on them for not disabling his account. So,
he disabled it. He did that after he was let go or left.
No, he left, and after he left, he walked off with the data. So, you know, that's one of the things you also need to have a discussion when you're doing an implementation. I think, Dodie, that was your question. Set about some rules and standards and some practices. When somebody is leaving, one of the things you want to make sure is that they're looking at future donors, that they're still trying to curry those donors, and that they're still trying to follow up with donors who are current. So it's important when somebody leaves that everything they were handled, don't just leave it in the person's name. Make sure it goes to somebody who can then follow up. Generally, it's the manager who can then follow up and either give it to somebody who will follow up if they don't have time, or divvy it up among the rest of the team so that they can sit there and continue following up and maintaining those relationships, because each of those is either a potential relationship or a current relationship, and they need to be tended to, and they need to, you know, have somebody pay attention to them. And if you just kind of leave the accounts and the donors and, you know, whatever in the name of the person who left, you know, they'll be like, oh, okay, nobody's called me, so I guess they're not interested in my money anymore. And they go off and they give to somebody else, you know. So that is one thing to think about, is having these practices, you know, disabling accounts right away, maybe not giving everybody the ability to create a report that way or export their reports, because that way they have to enter their data in Salesforce. And you
have integration users for scheduled reports and dashboards. I have my old employer that I left in February, March, still hasn't disabled or deactivated me. And I did some contract work with them, but I get the scheduled dashboard reports every morning, and I can still log into their org. And I do sometimes just to see to try to remember how I did something.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, like I shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I've also worked at a corporate org where they had a layoff, and they laid off about 600 people, and about 60 of those, like 10% of the people they laid off, went in, logged in, and probably pulled out all their data. Mm-hmm. And why else would you, if you're a sales guy, really accept it? So yeah, you need these practices put in. When somebody leaves, collect all the physical stuff like the laptop, the phone, what building card you give them, whatever else, and disable the account. That's, that's just, something that, but that's not really thought of. And that's, like I said, when I was at the nonprofit where the guy ran off with all the money, or the donor list, which is the equivalent of money, I said to them, no, these are relationships we need to keep building. We need to keep tending to these relationships. And if we don't, so we need to make sure that whoever that person was talking to, they go to another person. And if it's an old account, then maybe, give it to a new person to sit there and see if they can do something with it. But still, hand them off to somebody. Make sure there's a handoff of that information, and the account gets disabled.
Yes.
So that became one of my questions to ask people. Okay, when this person is leaving, what's their last day? Who do you want that data to go to? The accounts, the contacts, the stuff they were,
That's
that's an offboarding.
definitely.
Yeah.
So I missed a big chunk of this session. I apologize if this is redundant, but one governance piece that seems fairly easy and straightforward to implement is folders. If people put stuff in their private folder, then everybody else doesn't see it. And if you have a good set of folders and have everybody file things away, and then encourage them not to just look at all reports, but go into the folders, that might help with finding what they're looking for. But that's the best piece of advice I've come up with so far, and it's pretty minimal. And I wanted to ask, is anyone using a query tool to get data other than, outside of using list views and reports that they recommend?
I haven't played with it, but Tableau, obviously, it's the one.
Yeah, and I would question that. I've used SQL queries just very, very briefly, but that was to query data within Salesforce itself, like the fields, who created them, and trying to do a cleanup. It wasn't, for example, the actual data within them. That I've left to reports. But like, for example, if I was in the middle of trying to do a page cleanup, and that I've used SQL queries to try and figure out what was used recently and what wasn't, because again, and that's where I found out there were like 6 versions of email, and it's like, why? And then somebody actually put the word ramen, and I've never been able to find out what that is. And I suspect it was just somebody fooling around, because it's literally spelled RAMAN, just like the noodles. And I don't know if the guy who entered that field was just yanking people's chains.
Oh, it's the name of the field?
It's the name of the field is ramen, RAMAN. And as far as I can tell, it's not a sales term of any sort. I'm married to a sales guy. I asked him, he didn't know. I'm thinking maybe the guy who created the field was just kind of monkeying around.
Dottie, the other way I have gotten information out of Salesforce other than reports and list views would be to export it, but that's only when I have to export all the records and I just want it to run for a couple hours. If there's like tons of data in the system and I don't want the report to churn, I'd rather just write the SQL query in data loader and then export it out. Or sometimes when it's not an object, some objects you can't report on, like it's not an option, so you have to export them via the data loader. Like even if you try to build a custom report type, the object's not available sometimes.
So I'll just put it out there for anybody who's still on the line who is technically inclined and for whom SQL wouldn't be intimidating, has some SQL experience perhaps. But I'm pretty sure on the setup menu, there's like the developer console and you can do SQL queries right there. And I think I need to get myself familiar with that more so that I'm not creating reports for ad hoc questions.
Well, I think what Mary was saying is if you have something you need, one thing you can do is go to an existing report and then just edit it and not save what you're doing just to get the answer to the question. And that's probably the easiest lift rather than having to write a SQL query. but then it doesn't take up the data because you only needed it that one time because this
Right.
one donor needed to know this one thing.
But my fantasy is, and I don't know if this is true, if I can see a list of my past SOQL queries in the developer console, then I could always go back and rerun a SOQL query without taking up space in a report. I mean, that's the dilemma whenever you create a report, is like, should I keep this lying around because I might need it again, or should I delete it? And it's like a catch-22. Like, if you delete it, you know you're going to need it again. And if you don't delete it, then you got all this garbage lying around.
You know, I think if you have a data governance policy and you put it in a folder that is like may need to be deleted, or you say anything in the X folder is going to be deleted after 30 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or, you know, you just take into account how much you customize the report. So if you did something like we did today, where we created a bucket field and a formula field, and maybe you created multiple buckets and multiple groupings and matched it, you know, 5 different ways, of course you want to save that because you spent all that time.
Right.
And if it was a business use case right now, it will probably be in the future.
Right.
But if it was just something that you grouped, I don't know, like if it was just like a one-time request because you had to do something for a grant report, say,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it was very specific to that one funder, and that funder was not going to give another gift, then
Mm-hmm.
you can put it in that to be deleted report folder, and then
I like
you're
it.
not chunking it up.
Sounds good. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. See everybody next time.
Okay, see you next week. Thank you so much, Jody. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
All right, bye.
Bye.